first warning was the tremor New Berlin Station. Orbiting the neutral trade world of Kithros Prime was used to heavy traffic. Cargo freighters lumbered through every hour. Sleek couriers darted between docks. Even warships, bristling with weapons, came and went without rattling the station's reinforced hull. But this time was different. The tremor was not mechanical. It was not the docking clamps or the movement of airlocks. The tremor was in the bones, a resonance that hummed through steel and flesh alike. It made drinking glasses quiver and set every loose panel to vibrating. When the sentries looked to the skies, they froze. The ship was arriving, if it could even be called a ship. It was vast, so large the station's sensors struggled to measure its bulk. Not metal, not fully. Its hull shimmered like living crystal, threaded with veins of luminous blue. Plates shifted slowly as though the vessel were breathing. The docking system screamed warnings: too much mass, too close, too unstable. Yet the ship moved with perfect control. Easing into position, as if space itself bent to its will, the gathered diplomat scores of species, draped in silks, scales, or armored hides, watched, with a mixture of dread and awe. Rumors had preceded this moment by months. The Varicol were coming. Ancient titans, beings said to predate the founding of the council itself. They were not merchants. They were not diplomats. They came only when they sought a bond. The Varicol were giants. And to bond with one was to tie two souls together in thought and memory, body and spirit. Few had ever attempted it. Fewer still survived. The process was said to burn minds like dry leaves, leaving husks behind. But for those rare, almost mythical few who succeeded, the bond granted unimaginable strength, knowledge, and longevity. Every empire wanted the honor. Every ruler dreaded the cost. The docking bay's massive gates parted with a groan. And then the giant stepped through. It stood 20 meters tall, dwarfing even the Drexori warlords who towered over most races. Its skin resembled obsidian stone, shot through with veins of pulsing light. Each step shook the deck. Though not from clumsiness, there was grace in its movement, the careful, deliberate motion of a being long accustomed to breaking worlds if it was not cautious. Its head turned slowly, eyes like twin suns scanning the chamber. No translator could parse its first sound, a rumble like mountains grinding together. The machines crackled, trying to reshape the sound into meaning. But the air itself vibrated too violently for the devices to cope. Some of the diplomats averted their eyes. Some whispered prayers to their gods. A few, braver or more arrogant, tried to step forward. But the giant ignored them. It kept looking, searching, and then its gaze landed. Captain Elias Marrow had not come here to be chosen. He was not even seated with the primary delegation. He stood off to the side, near the Terran guards assigned to protect the human envoys. A soldier by trade, scarred by more battles than he cared to count, Elias had seen death up close too many times. His file did not mark him as extraordinary, just a reliable officer. Loyal to command, stubborn enough to survive. Yet when the giant's eyes locked onto him, something stirred deep within his chest. Not fear, not pride. Recognition. The tremor in the air deepened. The giant raised one hand, massive, shadowing entire rows of dignitaries, and pointed. Not at the Drexori warrior kings, who had trained all their lives to be bondworthy. Not at the Yolthur seers, masters of telepathic connection. Not at the Varish, who boasted minds like razors and 1,000 years of political grooming. It pointed at Elias. Gasps erupted across the chamber. Outrage followed a heartbeat later. This is a mistake. The Drexori bellowed, fists slamming against armored thighs. A primitive mammal? Absurd? Hissed a Yolthur, wings flickering with agitation. The process will kill him. Muttered the Varish, their voices silk-laced venom. The bond will fail, and the giant will rage. But the Varicol ignored them all. It lowered itself slowly, kneeling until its great eyes were leveled with Elias. The deck plates groaned under its weight. Yet the motion was deliberate, almost reverent. Its gaze did not waver. Its meaning was clear. The translator finally managed to croak out a word. Distorted and half-broken, chosen, and the entire council chamber fell silent. Elias, who had faced gunfire, plasma storms, and the abyss of war, felt his breath catch. The weight of 1,000 stares pressed down on him. But deeper than that weight, deeper even than fear, was a strange certainty. This giant, this ancient titan, had searched across species, across worlds, and decided on him. And though he didn't understand why, Elias already knew one thing for certain. This was no mistake. The chamber did not explode with applause or awe. It erupted in outrage. For a moment, the silence following the Verkal's declaration hung like a suspended blade. Then the council's gathered dignitaries broke into a cacophony of protests. Shouts and threats, their voices overlapping into a storm of disbelief. "This cannot be allowed," roared the Drexori warlord, his scaled fists pounding the polished obsidian table so hard, cracks spider-webbed across its surface. His armor clinked with ceremonial chains, each marking a victory in battle. A human. A race barely out of its infancy. The Verkal mocks us. "The ape will poison the bond," the Yulthar seer hissed, translucent wings vibrating at a furious pitch. Their multifaceted eyes reflected the giant's glow as they leaned forward. "Its mind is crude, its instincts violent. The titan will fall into madness." The Varish delegate, sleek and calm with their shimmering robes and unreadable expressions, spoke softly, yet their words cut deeper than the others' screams. "It is a risk too great. If the human dies in the bonding, the backlash will awaken the giant's rage. Do you want to see Kethra's prime burn?" Elias remained where he stood, surrounded by fury not his own. He felt the heat of alien eyes on him, their hatred mixing with disdain. In their view, he was beneath consideration, little more than an animal who had stumbled into a divine ritual, and yet the giant did not stir. The Verakal's massive form loomed behind the council, still kneeling, its burning gaze fixed only on him. It was waiting. Asking Elias felt his throat go dry. His mind flashed back to the battlefields of his youth. He remembered huddling in mud, bullets sparking against broken armor. He remembered the silence after, when the medics stopped shouting, because there were no more wounded to save. He remembered nights when laughter around the fire was the only shield against despair, and in that giant's eyes, he saw the same memories mirrored on a cosmic scale. Endless battles. Countless losses. The crushing loneliness of survival when all others had fallen. He whispered, barely audible, "Why me?" The answer came not in words, but in a surge of sensation. For the briefest moment, his mind touched the Verakal S. Images poured into him wars fought beneath burning suns. Titanic comrades falling into silence, centuries spent carrying grief too vast for language. The Titan's sorrow washed through him like a tidal wave, threatening to drown him. But threaded through the grief was something else. Recognition. Elias staggered back, clutching his chest, breath ragged. He had not been chosen by accident. The Verakal saw in him what the council could not. Endurance. The uproar intensified. Delegates shouted over one another, their voices rising in frantic competition. "This choice cannot be honored. We demand reconsideration. Humans have no right, no history of sacrifice for the council." Ilias's fellow Terrans shifted uneasily. One of his superiors, Ambassador Hale, leaned close and whispered fiercely, "Say nothing, Captain. Deny it. For Earth's sake, don't let this drag us into something we can't survive." But Elias did not answer. His gaze never left the giant. He remembered every time someone had told humans what they couldn't do, that they couldn't leave their gravity well, couldn't colonize worlds with harsher suns, couldn't win wars against enemies that had centuries of experience. Humanity's history was written in defiance of those limitations. And now, here he stood, once more being told what could not be done. Slowly, Elias straightened. His voice, when it came, was steady. "I'll do it." The chamber froze. The translators fell silent. Even the Drexori mid-roar shut their jaws with an audible crack. "You cannot be serious," spat the Varish delegate, eyes wide for the first time. "You would doom us all." The Yulthur seer shrieked. "Human!" thundered the Drexery warlord, stepping forward, towering over Elias by several feet. "You are not worthy." Elias met the alien's gaze without flinching. He was smaller, weaker, fragile compared to them, but he had stood against death too many times to cower now. "I didn't ask to be chosen," he said firmly, "but I won't turn away. Not from this," the Vercall rumbled, the sound shaking the chamber's walls. The translator, strained but clear, gave a single word: accepted. The decision was made. No threats, no protests, no laws of the council could change it now. The ancient Titan had chosen, and Elias had answered. The chamber erupted again, but this time Elias did not hear them. His heart pounded, his mind reeled, but beneath the storm of fear and uncertainty was a sharp, undeniable truth, for better or worse. His fate was no longer his alone. The Vercall had chosen him, and Elias Marrow had chosen back. The ceremony was not a spectacle for the masses. There were no parades, no banners, no anthems to mark the moment. The Vercall did not indulge in ritual pomp. What they did with necessity and gravity. And so, while the council screamed in chambers behind closed doors, Elias Marrow was taken to the Titan's living ship to face his fate alone. The vessel itself was alien in every sense. Its corridors pulsed with a faint inner glow, walls of shifting crystal that bent and flexed as though breathing. The air smelled faintly of ozone and iron. Shapes rippled in the surfaces. Were they decorations, or memories encoded into the hull? Elias couldn't tell. The deeper he walked, the more the corridors seemed to listen to his footsteps. Adjusting to his stride, finally he reached the heart chamber. It was vast, a hollow sphere lit by rivers of light flowing through the walls. At the chamber center stood the Vercall, towering like a mountain of living stone. Its eyes flared as Elias approached, and the floor beneath him rose in a platform, lifting him until he was level with the giant's chest. "You stand before the bond," murmured the translator, though Elias felt the words directly in his skull. "Do you accept?" Elias swallowed hard. He thought of Earth, of the council's jeers, of the weight of billions who would hear of this. He thought of the giant's grief, carried alone for centuries. He thought of himself, not a diplomat, not a chosen hero, just a soldier who refused to bend. "I accept." The chamber changed instantly, tender elts from the Titan's chest, reaching toward him like slow, deliberate vines. They wrapped around his temples, his spine, his chest. The first touch was searing cold, then blinding heat, stabbing into nerves he hadn't known existed. Elias bit down on a cry, but when the tendrils fully latched, the scream ripped from his throat anyway. Then came the flood. Images, sensations, entire lifetimes crashed into his mind. He was not Elias anymore. He was dozens, hundreds of Titans, their memories layered and crushing. He felt himself standing on worlds with skies of molten fire. He felt the burn of enemy plasma across a body the size of a mountain. He felt the silence when comrades fell, the endless grief of battles that never ended. His body convulsed on the platform. His heart raced, his veins screamed with fire. The human brain was not built for this much everything. It would break him, just as the council had predicted. But Elias fought. He clawed his way up through the flood, dragging pieces of himself back into place. His name, his voice, his stubborn refusal to die in the mud of foreign worlds. He remembered lying in trenches with comrades, joking even as death rained from the skies. He remembered the smell of coffee before dawn on base. He remembered his sister's laugh, the letters she sent to remind him there was more to life than war, and he gave those memories back. The Vercall roared not aloud. But inside him, the chamber shook as though the ship itself trembled with the giant's cry. For centuries, the Titan had carried only grief, only silence. Now, into that emptiness, Elias poured humanity's defiance, its absurd hope, its unyielding instinct to laugh in the face of despair. For a terrible, beautiful moment, they collided, two souls, alien and human, grinding against one another, threatening to shatter. Elias thought his skull would split apart. The Titan thought its heart would burst, but neither gave in, and then balance. The flood slowed. The memories settled, weaving into him not as a drowning tide, but as a river flowing alongside his own thoughts. Elias gasped, collapsing to his knees, sweat pouring down his face. Yet his mind was clear. His body aching, trembling was alive. And inside his skull, a voice spoke. Deep as mountains, steady as the void bondmate. Elias lifted his head, meeting the Veracal's burning eyes. He should have felt terror or smallness, or the hollow fear of losing himself. Instead, he felt something else. Belonging? The Titan straightened, its colossal form radiating strength. Yet Elias knew it no longer stood alone. For the first time in eons, the Veracal had a companion, a mind beside its own. And for Elias, who had lived too long with ghosts of his own, the bond felt like a weight shared, not a burden. When the platform lowered and he stepped back onto solid ground, his body was weak, but his spirit burned brighter than it ever had. He was no longer merely Captain Elias. Marrow, he was bonded, and the galaxy would soon learn what that meant. News spread faster than any courier ship could carry it. The impossible had happened. The Veracal had bonded, and it had bonded with a human. The council chambers echoed with outrage, panic, and secretive whispers. Some races demanded the bond be annulled by force, others whispered of assassination. And still others quietly wondered what such a union might mean for galactic balance. But none acted as swiftly as the Drexori. For them, the choice was an insult carved in fire. The Drexori warlords had spent centuries preparing their finest champions to be deemed worthy. They had trained their minds in agony, their bodies in crucibles of violence, and then dismissed, cast aside for a Terran soldier, a mammal with soft skin and short years. Their response was inevitable. Within a day of the bond, sensors lit with alarms. A Drexori fleet, bristling with warships, emerged from warp near the Titan's living vessel. 30 ships in total, more than enough to reduce a star system to ruin. The Veracal ship stirred. The walls around Elias pulsed, as if sensing his rising heartbeat. He stood in what passed for the bridge, though there were no controls, no displays. He didn't need them anymore. The Titan's awareness was his awareness. Its senses stretched across kilometers of ship flesh and weapon nodes. Every Drexori warship registered in his mind like storm clouds bristling with lightning. "They're here for me," Elias muttered. "They're here for us," the Titan's voice answered within his skull. Its words were not a thought. It was a presence as solid as a hand on his shoulder. "Do you fear?" Elias thought about it. His hands trembled. His stomach churned. Any sane man would feel fear facing an armada. But beneath the fear was something deeper. Not calm, not exactly. A clarity born from every battlefield he'd survived. "No, I know what to do." The Drexori opened fire. Bolts of plasma the size of buildings streaked across space. To Elias, they weren't just lights. They were needles of heat tearing through the void. Each one humming in the back of his skull, as though they were already touching him. Instinctively, he raised his hand. The Veracal moved with him. A massive arm, glowing with crystalline veins, swept upward. Reality folded, light bent, and suddenly the plasma bolts shattered against an invisible shield, bursting into harmless showers of sparks that dissipated into space. Elias gasped. He hadn't activated anything. He had just willed it. The Drexori roared overcomes their language, full of growls and snaps. They regrouped, launching squadrons of fighters. Hundreds of sleek attack craft swarmed, weaving like insects, spitting beams of searing energy. This time, Elias didn't wait. His lips curled in a feral grin. "Let's hit them back." The Titan obeyed without hesitation. Its other arm swept forward, and from its crystalline veins lanced beams of condensed starlight. They weren't neat, controlled shots like Council warships used. They were wild, jagged bursts, like the fury of an ancient god unleashed. Fighters scattered in panic, but dozens were torn apart instantly, reduced to glowing debris fields. The Drexori fleet closed in, heavier cannons warming. Elias felt their intent like storm clouds pressing against his mind. He could see their formation, their angles of attack, their overconfidence. He had fought enemies like this before, not with starships, but with tanks, drones, and ambush lines. And just as then he saw the weakness. "They think they know war," Elias murmured. "Let's show them human war." With a thought, he commanded the Titan to seize nearby debris from shattered fighters. Chunks of twisted metal, still glowing with plasma fire, drifted in the void. The Verkal gathered them with gravitational tendrils, then hurled them like stones from a giant sling. The debris slammed into the Drexori cruisers, tearing holes, piercing shields. It was crude, brutal, and devastating. The enemy panicked. Their formation fractured. One ship veered too close, and Elias struck again, this time not with weapons, but with the Titan's massive hand. The giant physically grabbed the ship, claws sinking into armor, crushed it like a child snapping a toy. The screams overcomes went silent. For the first time in centuries, the Drexori retreated. Their fleet limped away, shields crackling, weapons sputtering. Pride could not withstand annihilation. As silence fell over the battlefield, Achilles stood with his chest heaving, sweat dripping down his face. The Titan's voice rumbled through him. "You are different. You fight without restraint." Elias smirked, though exhaustion tugged at his muscles. "That's called being human." The Titan's great head tilted, as if considering the word. Then it nodded. The galaxy, watching from 1,000 sensor buoys and relay stations, understood what had happened. The last of the Verkal now had a bondmate, and that bondmate was a human. Together, they had driven off an armada. The balance of power had shifted, and for the first time, the galaxy whispered in fear. Humanity was no longer small. When dawn broke over the scarred battlefield, a silence unlike any before swept across the contested valley. Smoke curled from blackened wreckage, the earth still warm with the memory of plasma fire. In the distance, alien soldiers of rival factions watched with wide, unblinking eyes, unsure of what came next. For the first time in living memory, the Yatha towering. Feared giants of legend stood not as enemies, nor even as neutral observers, but united under a single banner. And at the center of them all was Daniel Hale, a lone human who had earned their trust, their respect, and above all, their bond. The Yath High Council gathered in a crescent around him. Each elder towered 20 feet high, their crystalline horns gleaming like weapons of light. Their voices, deep as mountains groaning, carried both awe and unease. No alien had ever heard a Yath Council sound so hesitant. Human. One elder intoned, her voice echoing through the shattered valley. "Your defiance last night shifted the tides. The war between the Yath and the Krell was not won by firepower alone. It was won because the bondmater giant stood unyielding." She gestured toward Kaerun, who stood a respectful distance away, his colossal frame scorched but unbowed. Even injured, the alien giant's presence radiated quiet strength. "Yet this is without precedent," another elder thundered. "A human in council. A bond between species thought incompatible. What meaning do we assign to this?" Daniel, who had slept little and still bore burns from the fight, raised his head. His voice carried no thunder, no mountain-deep resonance, but it cut through the silence all the same. "It means," he said evenly, "that humanity was willing to stand where no one else dared." The words rippled through the council like a shockwave. Warriors shifted uneasily, priests exchanged uneasy glances, and even Kaerun straightened, pride flickering in his amber eyes. Daniel stepped forward. "You feared us. You dismissed us. But when the Krell brought annihilation to your doorstep, who stood beside you? Not your rival clans. Not your allies who swore loyalty in treaties. It was a single human. And together, Kaerun and I showed that courage isn't measured in size, or strength, or even bloodline. It's measured in choice." A younger Yoth warrior rumbled from the ranks. "And what choice do you claim now, human?" Daniel looked around at the circle of titans, unflinching despite their enormity. "The choice for peace, for alliance. Not as your servant, not as your pet, but as your equal. Humanity does not bow, but we stand. And if you let us, we'll stand with you." The declaration sent a murmur rolling through the giants. The elders were silent, processing the weight of words spoken by someone so small in their eyes, yet who had stood shoulder to shoulder with one of their own when the flames rose. Finally, the High Elder rose to her full towering height. Her crystalline horns caught the dawn light, scattering it like shattered stars. "Never in our history," she declared, "has a Yath chosen a bond outside our kind. Yet Kyrun has done so, and through this act our people endured. Humanity has earned a voice among us. The Council accepts this truth." Her pronouncement was met with a deep, resonant roar from the gathered Yath warriors. It wasn't a war cry. It was an oath of recognition. Kyrun stepped forward then, his shadow draping Daniel in twilight. He lowered one colossal hand, and with ceremonial precision, placed it over his chest, the Yath gesture of eternal brotherhood. Daniel mirrored the action, though his hand was small against his own heart. The valley trembled with the sound of thousands of youth following suit. For the first time in their history, their salute was not offered to one of their own, but to an outsider. To a human from that day forward, the story spread far beyond the battlefield. Two distant colonies and rival empires, whispers carried the same message. The Yath had chosen a human, and that human had spoken not just for himself, but for all of Earth. The galaxy, long accustomed to dismissing humanity as reckless children, now had to reckon with a terrifying reality. If one human could sway the mightiest giants into alliance, what else might humanity achieve? As Daniel stood in the dawn light, shoulder to shoulder with Kyrun, he realized the truth that would echo across history. The bond was no accident. It was a warning. The galaxy would never underestimate humans again. End of story.